The agenda this week heard from former Canadian Olympians about life after competition, reflected on a soldier's struggle to improve mental health services for those who served in this country's military, considered what automation means for creativity in the arts, and went in search of safer streets for Ontario's capital city. The agenda's Week in Review begins considering trade in the shadow of proposed U.S. tariffs. Sarah, I wonder how much damage has already been done, inasmuch as business, of course, likes predictability, and there has been nothing predictable. Brian just outlined it perfectly. This was a shot across the bow without telling any of the important arms of the American government. How much of the damage is already done, regardless of how much of his initial musings may get walked back over the next period of time?
Well, I think this is a problem that we've seen with this president and economic issues that affect other countries specifically. And I'm thinking about NAFTA, but also the Korea-U.S. trade agreement. And Korea is also a large importer of steel into the United States. It's third after Canada and Brazil, and Mexico is fourth. And all four of these countries import a lot more steel into the United States than China, which only really imports about 2% of steel into the United States. And so all of these tariffs, at the end of the day, are not going to do what he's trying to do by initiating the entire process. But I think the amount of uncertainty is really, in some ways, doing exactly what he set out to do. And I think you see this with the NAFTA discussions, that he's created an environment where if your market is the United States, you're much safer to actually physically locate your business and manufacture your goods and provide your services within the United States than you are in trying to rely on any sort of global trade agreement to allow you access into that market. And so I think there's a fair amount of unpredictability, which is affecting investors. And it's affecting businesses and the decisions that they're making when they're trying to decide where to open their new factory or create their new headquarters. The United States has moved in a way with sticks rather than carrots to attract business back into the U.S.
Brian, if that's the end game, to sow so much discord and unease around the world that companies say to themselves, well, I guess we better put a plant in the United States, otherwise we're never going to get into that market. Do we have to acknowledge maybe that Trump is crazy smart on this one?
I think he's more crazy than smart. And personally, I don't think we're going to see a huge amount of investment in the U.S. just because of this type of action. The fact is that there is idle capacity in the U.S. There's no question about that. There are idle aluminum and steel plants. They could be restarted. But companies are going to be very slow to make decisions like that. They're going to want to see how all this plays out first. It can take up to 10 years to build a new mill from scratch. Companies that are saying, oh, yes, we're going to invest in a new mill, we're going to hire thousands of workers, that's not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen quickly. What we'll see is that steel and aluminum companies operating in the States, their profits will go up because they'll be able to charge higher prices. Their share prices will go up. Their CEOs will make a lot more bonus money. And that's one of the reasons that they keep lobbying hard for these restrictions. They want to make more money out of the steel and aluminum they're already making.
But ironically, the Chamber of Commerce would be opposed to this. Maybe the individual companies are on side, but the bigger business community is opposed.
Well, because the steel and aluminum consuming sector is 10 times, more than 10 times bigger than the actual steel and aluminum producing sector. So the likelihood of job losses among companies that use these products is much higher than any gains they could possibly make.
Have you had meetings yet with the Government of Canada on this?
No, we've not had meetings, but we've had some conversation via letters and whatnot to basically show our concerns that we should do whatever we can to make sure that Canada is exempt, and because we're not the problem. But on the bigger question of trade is that because we're part of an international union, and I know the effects that it's had in regards to our members in North America, is that you have a lot of idle capacity in aluminum and you have idle capacity in steel. And what they're trying to do is, our union is very proactive in the U.S. particular to basically file trade disputes, be it in tire, be it in rubber, be it in steel. We constantly do that. We're starting to get into some of that here in Canada. We have dumping that comes to Canada, and we try to get the government to keep that at bay.
Where's it from? Is it China mostly?
Some China, some Korea. We just had a rebar case in British Columbia. We just had a pipe case from Korea. We've been successful in that. The difference for us as a union is that in the U.S. We have access to the trade complaints where we don't have full access yet here in Canada. We can participate, so we're very much concerned. I think the other factor is that if the 25% goes to these other countries, and the concern this government has to really be cautious about, that these companies that cheat and not play by the rules, they'll try to find a new home for their product, be it in aluminum or steel. And this is where Canada is going to have to be very vigilant in regards to making sure that their borders are basically fully manned to make sure that that stuff does not come into Canada and is going to have a detrimental effect.
I came home the other day and I've got a little 2-year-old son who came running down the hallway, "Daddy!" And that might have been one of the greatest moments of my life, right? And so it does get better. There are amazing things that happen. It's certainly different, but yeah, it's, I mean.
And you don't worry about replicating the highs of your previous career?
I think initially we do.
You do initially?
I think we're searching for it. When you come off the competition journey and the success and everything that comes with competing in the hours, I think we're all guilty that we're searching and we make a lot of mistakes because we're looking for that high again. We're looking for that, don't forget who I am. You know, we're so afraid people are going to forget us. Because we've been on the world scene, we've been in the limelight for so long, and there's that desperation. But I think it does get to a point where you realize it's okay. It's okay.
Don't you find though, I mean, in your case, no one's forgotten you. Anybody who was alive to have watched those Olympics in Calgary, they remember you. Of course they do.
It means a lot to hear that.
No, of course they do.
But you know what? I'm going to be really honest. If we're being very open here, every Olympics that happens on TV, I cry. I miss it. I miss it. I cry. You know, the Olympics just now in Korea, and I saw everybody there. I see Brian Orser, coach. I see all these friends, and as an athlete, you have that emotional, and you know, and it's funny because I have my family say to me, "How are you feeling right now?" You know, and I feel old, like I miss it, and you know, there's that little bit of a sadness.
Don't you think that they remember you, but they only know you for one moment, one shot in time,
and that's where you're grasping.
And it's a snapshot. And
you're more than just that moment.
You're more than just that moment. And when you say it's the best moment of your life, it's just a small snapshot. And you know as an athlete that it doesn't mean that you worked harder or that you did everything better than everyone else. And there's some components of that, but it's a day that it came together for you, and maybe it didn't come together for somebody else. Yeah, and it happens once every 4 years. And in a sport like mine, it lasts 3 seconds long. So to know that you stood on that podium is a proud moment, but you know, I think most athletes would say they're proud of when they got up at 6 in the morning to do something they didn't want to do. And that's the things that I define myself as in my character, is that, you know, it might not always be easy, it might not always be enjoyable, but when something needs to get done, I know how to make myself put the one step in front of another, and that's the characteristics.
And you can bottle those moments, like we were talking about trying to find another moment. One of the greatest moments of my life was buying my mom her first house after the Olympics. And you know, the average person wouldn't understand that feeling, but as an athlete and all the people behind you, you know, that entourage of support and love and what you can do for them, like, that's a great moment. To me, that was just as good as an Olympic medal, was seeing my mom crying when she got her first house, you know.
Nobody asks you about it.
Yeah,
so then,
yeah. I'd like people to maybe know me for those moments as well.
One more excerpt from the book. Here we go. Documenting genocide. We parked our vehicles in the knee-high grass, glanced around, and started walking towards the church. As we made our approach, the grass gradually became flatter and flatter. And once we got a little closer to the church, we understood why. The ground was completely littered with corpses, which from afar, because of months of rain, decomposition, and the tattered clothes the victims had been wearing, looked like dirt and garbage. There were adults and children of all ages, several thousand of them. How does a person who has seen this ever come back to his home country and, quote unquote, be normal again?
Well, I think I say in the book that when I stepped off the flight, I now look back as that being the first day of the rest of my life. My norm is not what it used to be. I think a new norm sets in. For me, the new norm I'm in recovery now. I know how to deal with these things, right? But yeah, that's a really hard question to answer because normal is not what it used to be.
You're never going to be.
That's right. But healing means that you're okay with the new norm. And I remember being in the, Peter Boyles is gonna, my psychiatrist is gonna have a chuckle here when I say, I remember saying to him, is this as good as it gets? And he looked at me and he said, yes. And I said, thank you. Now I know that I'm going to cope with this and it's going to be okay.
You knew what you were up against now.
Exactly. And that blunt honesty from a psychiatrist to say, you know what? Yeah, that's a good question. And from that moment on, I was able to sort of accept my new norm. So norm doesn't have to be the same, right? And I think that's the value of that recovery philosophy. And also normalizing this is extremely helpful when you have the support of colleagues, right? Where you understand that it's never going to be like it used to be, but it's going to be okay. Doctors, you know, Dr. Boyles' honesty that day was instrumental, but the support of others around me, which is my passion now to create these support systems for people, was instrumental as well.
The Dr. Boyle that you just complimented, you had some other expressions for some other psychiatrists who you said often misunderstand and underestimate the moral conflict that lies at the center of traumatic events. How so?
I think that we have overemphasized the word trauma, and we have put, unbeknownst to ourselves, unbeknownst to the American and Canadian Psychiatric Associations, too much value in focusing only on the trauma part of what happens to human beings when they're exposed to abnormal situations. And there is a spectrum of feelings that a human being goes through when he or she is exposed to things that are outside the everyday norm, right? And it's not black or white, it's not green or red, it's on a spectrum. And therefore, when you have a really bad experience, you can be disturbed, you can be upset. You don't necessarily need to be traumatized to need help. But in our world now, even in Ontario, the presumptive legislation for PTSD, for first responders, I don't think that is a mistake. It is a move in the right direction, but there are unintended consequences to this. Because what it's basically saying, Stephen, is that for those who develop PTSD from their work environment, you will be looked after. But what about the 50% of people who don't develop PTSD? Clinical research shows that when you expose somebody to a lot of hardship, like a police officer, half of those people who need help will not have PTSD. So what are we doing for those people? If they don't have the right diagnosis now, you're helping one, so you have haves and have-nots. It's like telling somebody who falls off a ladder, I wish you would have broken your arm, because we only cover arms. You broke your leg, you're out of luck.
Every one of these incidents is a terrible tragedy. It is, there are trends that are being observed across North America. You look in the most recent research coming out of the United States, 27% increase since 2007 in pedestrian death. And there's a lot of research and there's a lot of discussion about what is causing this and how is this happening. And we're seeing a similar trend here in Ontario. So I can tell you that Toronto Police and the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police are working with our external partners and all stakeholders in this issue to try to find ways that we can better get out the message, better conduct enforcement, and address these issues, because we have to save lives. And Mayor Tory's comments about it being a crisis, it truly is. And we need to treat it that way.
We will unpack all of that as we go along. Jamie, you want to weigh in on that? The significance of those numbers to you?
Yes, thank you. I do think that those statistics are alarming, and they're not just statistics. Each one of those people was someone who was trying to get home at the end or beginning of their day to their loved ones and their family, and that did not happen. And that is the work that we are collectively trying to do in Ontario when we're out on our roads trying to get to where we need to be. It should not be a risky operation, and we have a lot of work to do to design safer spaces so that everyone arrives home safely.
Design is something we will return to in our conversation as well. Patrick, your initial thoughts?
Alarming, shocking, little's been done. We're setting records on the number of pedestrians being killed in our city. Last year, we had a record, one of the largest pedestrian fatality rates in decades. So there's a dismal failure in preventing this, and it lies at various levels.
We do have to try to understand some of the reasons underlying all this. I'm sure they are multifaceted, so let's start to go through them. Scott, give us one reason why the numbers would be so much higher this year as compared to last.
This is a really difficult thing to try to unpack. When we look into our investigations that go into these things, there are so many factors that are contributing to it. And I can tell you, and I don't mean to sound in any way callous, but there's also the term KSI collisions, killed and seriously injured. When you look at KSI data, the difference between what can make a fatality versus someone who is seriously injured can sometimes just be, I mean, it's splitting hairs. Yeah. When you look at KSI data, the trend is still increasing. And when we look at that, there's so many factors. Distraction, motorists that are driving too fast on our roads, people that are in a rush, applications like Waze, where we've got people taking alternate routes to get from A to B that they didn't take before. Because
this is the app on your smartphone.
Computer applications that are helping you get somewhere faster. Mm-hmm. This rush, we need to get a message across to people to not be in a rush.
Do you find distracted driving is still a big problem? People on their cell phones while driving?
Distracted driving is a huge problem. Distracted driving, arguably, is a leading cause in all of this. Distraction as well with pedestrians. We have people that are going about their day-to-day life and they are addicted to this device that they must look at. They feel they must look at it on an ongoing basis. Motorists, pedestrians, other road users, and the ultimate result is devastating.
We should, I mean, you've made a good point here, Patrick, which is that it's not just motorists who are on their smartphones when they ought not to be. Pedestrians do this when they're crossing the street too, right?
Pedestrians do have their phones, and they do have their phones when they cross the street. But you have to understand, there's a very big difference. And when people start saying, oh, pedestrians are on their phone and they're part of the problem, it really is a form of victim blaming, because when you're on your phone and you're in a car, firstly, you're distracted. It could be even seen as equivalent to being drunk. You're impaired. You hit somebody, you're going to kill them. What happens to you is very little. You get a dent on your car. You're preserved in your car. If a pedestrian, though, when we're talking about deterrence, they have self-preservation. They make a mistake, they get hurt or killed. That inherent self-preservation restricts them from doing that. But there's very little restriction on the drivers driving around with phones and, in fact, being in a position where they're going to kill somebody.
We're going to come back to more of this in a second. What would you add to the list of reasons why the numbers seem to be so much higher this year than last?
I would, to the list that's been outlined here, I think I would add that, you know, we're working as a society to provide people with more safe choices. And, you know, our governments are encouraging people to walk and bike and take transit. And yet the design of our streets, which I'll continue to repeat, hasn't caught up to the number of people who are out taking transit, walking and cycling. So there's not enough clear, safe spaces for everyone to really be sharing the road.
You know, as much as I think I object to the notion of a fake Frank Sinatra singing, there is something kind of cool about the notion that as I'm reading a book about whatever, there is, you know, push a button on the side of the book and there's a soundtrack that just starts playing, I don't know what, some music while you're reading. That sounds kind of interesting, actually.
This is a point we're all coming back to. Like, art only, it's exciting to you to have this music that would play. And this is the thing, it's only if it means something to us. Like the computationally generated work of art is only good if it means something to us. So we decide. You know, there are areas of the world where AI is going to solve some objectively useful task. Like this morning I'm reading about bricklayers, this is in the New York Times, bricklayers versus, human bricklayers versus robots. Well, like it makes sense to have an AI-trained robot to build a brick wall because it saves money. It only makes sense to have AI helping us generate music or narrative or images if we enjoy it, you know, because it's for us. It responds to very human needs.
Okay, which jobs, David, let me go to you first on this one. Which jobs out there right now do you think are most at risk with the rise of automation, artificial intelligence, algorithms, etc.? Which jobs currently in the arts-related field?
In the arts-related field, a lot of work where you're mostly doing a technical process. I mean, we're already putting parts of ourselves out of business in the sense of there's certain processes I don't bother to do anymore because I can get the computer to do it for me. I tend to work alone, so I'm just putting parts of myself out of business. But if you're in a group, then you're putting, for example, 3D printing and computational artificial intelligence optimization of engineering form. You can design really kind of bizarre structures that are incredibly light and very strong that you would never imagine designing. Well, that's replaced an engineer, a designer. There's someone involved in there. That's the person who's not going to be pushed off is the person who keeps trying to step beyond whatever is out there right now. And I think that's a kind of key thing. The way we get artificial intelligences to do these things is we feed them lots of data from the past. So we feed them every book that's available in an ebook fashion, or we look at these archives of paintings that are in all these archives around, available online. That's the past. So there's always we're always potentially going to be out there out innovating the machines.
Catherine, if you're a copywriter, if you're a songwriter, if you're a music producer, if you're an editor, are you feeling a little vulnerable these days?
Some people are, but as everyone else has said, it's those who are really wanting to do new and creative things, and everyone should be wanting to do new and creative things, are not in a position, this is going to be a new tool for them. But for people who catalog music, who have to try to keep track of all the data, this is just a wonderful, because no one's doing that. You can't do it. The volume is too big that humans can't do it. So that's a real boon in that business.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, March the 9th, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed, that's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.